I wanted to 3D print an army that looks just like Krieg, but fights in a nightmare, and I really just wanted to give some attention to a tabletop game that isn't Games Workshop. So when this video sponsor Dakadaka.store reached out to me to ask if I would be interested in printing out their Torquemada's Inquisition Kickstarter based around the game Trench Crusade, I jumped at the chance, and there is a way to also get some of these models for free, which I'll explain later on. I'm going to be printing them in resin, but I know a lot of you only use FDM printers. So if you also want to see how these come out on an FDM printer, you're going to want to keep watching. So why am I printing Trench Crusade? It's not because of the sponsorship, because in all honesty, that was just a happy coincidence. But it's because for the month of April, in the private Discord, we held an event called Alternative April, where the challenge was simply to print out and paint things that weren't to do with Games Workshop and 40k. I like 40k, don't get me wrong, but doing this project was like a breath of fresh air. I printed off the whole selection available to me, and one thing I will say straight off the bat is the pre-supports work brilliantly. I'm using Sunlu standard resin, which, let's face it, it isn't the best, but these supports come off so easy and there's no obvious islands from what I can see. The quality of the sculpts is also excellent. I didn't realize how detailed these would be because sometimes things that show up on the sculpt on the computer don't actually 3D print well, but these models came out excellent. I also got curious to see how well these would print out on an FDM printer, and I can say with using a 0.2mm nozzle and Fat Dragon Gaming's profile with 3 supports, they came out pretty good if I say so myself. So if you FDM print your minis, then at least you'll know by watching this video what to expect whenever you print these out. And this is also with me being super lazy and not trying any of the new fancy support tricks. I wanted to really do something special for this small army with the bases. I looked at 3D printing some pre-decorated bases, but I have been using my FDM printer to make blank bases for a very important reason. You see, I have a friend who is amazing at doing these really detailed thematic bases, and I keep saying that I want to get better at them, but I never actually do anything about it. So I decided with this army, I am going to give it a go and see what I can come up with. I broke up some cork boards from IKEA and cut them in half for a majority of the troops and kept the original thickness for a few liters just to make them stand out a little bit more. I also used some lollipop sticks that I broke up just to make it more like they are walking in trenches as much as I could at this scale, and I think they have come out quite well for the time that I have spent on them. Then, just for a few of the bases and the big stompy boy, I used some of my sandbags, which if you want to support the channel and get something useful and cool for your money, then you can grab my bags on either my Etsy or eBay store by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the links down below. To tie it all together with some texture on the flat spots and fill in some of the gaps, I use some dark earth texture paste, which I have had for a long time now. The models I'll be using for my Crusaders are from the range Torquemada's Inquisition Kickstarter by Dakadaka.store. Now, if you've been in the 3D printing space for a while, you probably have heard of these guys. But Dakadaka.store is a team of passionate wargaming enthusiasts who create 3D printable miniatures for a lot of our popular war games. Their Torquemada's Inquisition Kickstarter project features pre-supported STL files and also physical miniatures. All the models are made in the Trench Crusade scale and can obviously be used in Trench Crusade games as well. I'll tell you more about how you can get these models for free later on, but first, for the painting for these models, I want to try something new for me that I recently seen on a Marco from Not Just Mecha video. But to do that, I have to base coat the minis in a few different colors. To start off, I base coated everything with purple violet, because one thing I have picked up on since watching a lot of great painters videos is that rarely, it seems, do they actually use black to base coat with. To really push the shadows, I sprayed some dark purple speed paint, which I'm going to be honest, I couldn't really see what the difference was, but I'm just going to trust the process. My army's colors are going to be green, so I sanithized this bright green that I have, and I tried to focus on the clothing because although my Inquisition are the good guys, I just feel like being in war with hell for so many years will take a toll on the troops, and in World War I, trench foot was a serious concern, so I wanted a more nerdly green instead. Even though it is very bright, I wanted to sanitize the highest points with flesh ink. This will make sense later on, but before I get into why I'm doing this, I also sprayed on white ink on any exposed skin, which with these troops there isn't too much. Now there are 3 robed elite troops which I want to stand out a bit more, and while I thought about giving them like a cream coat, I think red is a much better choice. And then sprayed white ink onto the hoods because I have a plan for them later. A lot of these models are covered in big pieces of metal armor. So to paint those, I diluted down Vallejo steel with some airbrush thinner because I wanted to use it sort of like a contrast paint. I don't think this was a good idea because on some of the models, the green is showing through a bit too much, and I should have just put on the Vallejo steel straight from the pot because it's already diluted down. To paint the bullets and some other accent areas, I used Vallejo copper because it will be a nice contrast paint to the metals and the greens, but for the crosses and the shoulder pad of the leader, I decided to paint it using a gold recipe, which is 2 parts gold for 1 part copper, also 1 part medium, and some antique gold pigment. This is the gold recipe from the legendary Vinci Venturella on YouTube and is the absolute best gold I have painted with. Now it's time for the experiment. I use oil paints generally for oil washes by heavily diluting them down, but oil paints are actually way more useful than that. In his video, Marco used his oil paints like a contrast paint, and the results he got were absolutely amazing. So I diluted down to a contrast paint like consistency and painted burnt umber over the boots and other livery areas, which for this musketeer is a majority of the model. To really push the green colors, I use sap green over all of the clothes to get a nice, alive, but also at the same time disturbing skin tone. I used magenta over any exposed skin. I then used red over the 3 robed guys and different cloaks on each of the characters. I used cream, which was actually Naples yellow, over the sleeping sacks on the bags and on the sandbags on the bases. And one thing I did differently was using my char of black and brown wash all over the metals. I've had this char for ages now, and it's been used for so many different models. I waited for my oil contrast paints to dry and began wiping away with a dry makeup sponge, and this is where it all went wrong. The oil contrast paint works by staining the minis and seeping into all of those little cracks and crevices to create the same contrast effect, while also being easier to get a nice blended effect. But the oils didn't stain the minis, and instead it just came right off. Have I just wasted my time trying this? I was left demotivated and left the oils on the models for a couple of days. And then when I tried to wipe away the excess oils, it was too hard because I had left it far too long and they had fully cured on the models. This is nothing like how Marco was getting it. I do have a feeling maybe it was because I used the citrus oil thinner instead of spirits like he did, but I now have models that need fixing. So I decided the best thing to do is what I should have done in the first place. I used speed paints, which is basically what I was trying to replicate. I started with slaughter red for the cloaks and 3 priests, then used hardened leather for all wooden and leather parts. I used plague bearer's flesh for all of the green clothing. I also realized at this point that the pants and jackets blend into each other a bit too much and there's absolutely no contrast whatsoever. So I used bone white for a base coat for the pants, and because I don't want to give up on oils completely, I also use them slightly diluted down to blend in areas like the pants and the green coats on the knights. What I will say is that I probably should have just done an extra layer of the bone white color. I don't think this really added too much, and in actual fact it comes out a lot brighter after it has fully dried. I also diluted heavily white oil paint and pen washed the red robes guys' hoods, and after it dried overnight I then applied on some fluorescent yellow to make it look like as if it's burning from within. I then used orange oil paint and tried to blend it into the red, sort of to show that it's like burning from within. I don't think I've done a good job, so if you have any tips, please let me know in the comments. I also had dry brushed on Vallejo silver to quickly highlight the metals, which there is a lot of on some of these models. To finish the bases and make them look different than the rest of the models, I airbrushed burnt umber and then dry brushed pale sand onto the absolute highest areas, and then finally blacked out the rims. I've printed out a total of 28 models and it used less than 250 grams of resin. So for a full army capable of doing a narrative campaign, it cost in resin roughly $7.50. So if you want to do the same, you can get the files by checking out the Torquemada's Inquisition Kickstarter, which launches sometime around June. So subscribe to their campaign page now so that you're first in line when the project goes live. And also make sure you're subscribed to this channel because I have a lot of things coming up very soon. Also, remember when I said about how to get free minis? Well, right now you can get one of the miniatures from the project absolutely for free. Subscribe to their email newsletter and you can get the Musketeer STL miniature right away. I'll leave the link in the description down below. As a bonus treat for Battle Commanders and above on the Patreon, Dakadaka.store have also been very generous in providing files for free. So if you're not already a Patreon, then become one today and get access to possibly the best Discord in the universe. Also, this is something I want to do more of in the future by working with creators to get their files in front of more people. So if you're a creator and you're interested in getting your models out there, then shoot me an email and join what hopefully will become monthly releases. These models came out great and I can't wait to play a game of Trench Crusade with them. And I think they will be excellent for use in a kill team setting as well. Which, if you've ever wondered how many kill teams can you get from one bottle of resin, then you should watch this video next. As always, I want to give a huge thanks to all of my Patreons and channel members because honestly, without your support, none of this is possible and I will forever be grateful for it. I'll see you all in the Discord.